Mike McDaniel's coaching seat isn't just warm, it's starting to sizzle. Dolphins fans have been debating it for weeks. But the real question is this: how nervous should he actually be in the eyes of team owner Stephen Ross? And finally, we might have a clue. NFL insider Jeremy Fowler recently joined the Rich Eisen show and dropped an update that has people talking. According to Fowler, McDaniel's job security right now is moderately hot. Now, let's be real, moderately hot sounds like that awkward middle ground where you're not fired yet, but everyone's watching closely. If we're grading it on a scale from 1 to 10, that's probably around a 6 or 7. It's not burning, but one bad week could push it over the edge. Before we dive deeper, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, share this video with your football crew, and ring the bell so you never miss any breaking NFL stories. Personally, I think calling it moderately hot is being generous. This seat should already be on fire. The Dolphins have been underperforming, the offense looks inconsistent, and the spark that fans expected from McDaniel has faded fast. The signs have been there from the start. This might not be the coach who takes Miami where they want to go. If the Dolphins drop another game, maybe something like a 31-20 loss to the Chargers in Week 6, it wouldn't shock me if the front office finally pulls the trigger. Monday morning headlines could easily read, McDaniel out as Dolphins head coach. Now, to be fair, Fowler mentioned that Stephen Ross and the ownership group still believe in McDaniel. They see potential and are hoping he can turn things around. They genuinely like him, both as a person and as a football mind. But here's the problem. Stephen Ross has always been loyal to a fault. He values relationships and stability. And while that sounds noble, sometimes it blinds you to results. Chemistry between a GM, coach, and owner is great, but it doesn't mean much if the team keeps losing on Sundays. At the end of the day, only one thing truly matters in the NFL: results. Everything else is just noise. Fans don't want excuses, they want wins, and the sad truth is that Miami hasn't delivered in decades. Sure, there have been a few playoff appearances sprinkled in here and there, but not one meaningful victory to show for it under Mike McDaniel. It's getting harder and harder to understand how Stephen Ross continues to keep both Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel employed. Every day that those two still hold their jobs feels like another slap in the face to Dolphins fans who have waited far too long for something real. Because if we're being honest, it looks like ownership has stopped caring about the product on the field. And the product we've been watching every Sunday, Monday, or Thursday night. It's been flat out embarrassing. Now, that raises the big question. What actually forces a change? How do we go from a moderately hot seat to McDaniel being out the door? According to Jeremy Fowler, the key might be fan pressure. He hinted that Stephen Ross could eventually be forced to act if the fans completely turn on the team. And you know what? We're already starting to see it. Social media is filled with frustrated Dolphins fans calling out this organization. But it's not just about tweets. The real impact comes from the stands and the wallet. This league runs on two things: results and revenue. And if there's one thing NFL owners care about more than trophies, it's money. I'd say maybe 95 to 99% of them think that way. They'll protect the cash flow long before they protect pride. So how does that affect Miami? Simple. If fans stop showing up, if the stadium starts looking half empty on Sundays, if people stop buying jerseys, hats, and hoodies, that's when the alarm bells start ringing in the front office. When ticket sales and merchandise numbers crash, suddenly loyalty doesn't seem so valuable anymore. That's when Ross will have no choice but to make a change, not out of football passion, but out of business pressure. Now, my producer might not agree with me on this one. He says fans don't have that kind of power. But I do. Maybe owners will still make their millions, sure. But when your own fan base stops believing, stops supporting, and stops showing up, that hits deeper than any financial loss. Let's be honest, NFL owners might already be rich, but they always want more. And when that steady stream of money starts to slow down, suddenly the alarm bells start ringing. If the Dolphins' revenue starts dropping, fewer tickets sold, fewer jerseys, fewer fans showing up, Stephen Ross will feel the pressure. Because once that profit dips toward the little side of the scale, he'll realize something's got to change. And that something could very well be Mike McDaniel and Chris Grier. Now, to be clear, maybe fans don't control everything. I'll admit that. But to say we have no power? That's just not true. The fans absolutely play a role. If you're in Miami, hear me out. stop supporting this mediocrity. Don't buy the gear. Don't fill the seats. Don't let this ownership think you'll keep paying for failure. I've already made my stand. I won't wear a single piece of Dolphins gear until both McDaniel and Greer are gone. No jerseys, no hoodies, nothing. If you're tired of the same story every season, join me in sending that message. And trust me, when that day comes, when McDaniel finally gets shown the door, we're going live to celebrate it. So make sure you're subscribed, turn on those notifications, and don't miss a single update. Now, let's rewind for a second. Just a couple of days ago, a report surfaced that got everyone's attention. NFL writer Tony Pauline, who's been right about plenty of things in the past, released a piece suggesting when McDaniel could actually be fired. According to his sources, McDaniel was already on thin ice after the Week 1 loss to the Colts. They claim Stephen Ross might give it another 2 to 3 games before deciding whether to pull the trigger. And if you look at the schedule, the Chargers this week, Browns next, and Falcons after that, it paints a clear picture. If Miami drops all 3, they'll be sitting at 1-7, and at that point, there's no defending it. Honestly, one ugly loss this Sunday could be the final straw, especially with Jim Harbaugh on the other sideline, a coach Ross has openly admired for years. Losing badly to him would be beyond embarrassing for this ownership. And there's one more twist. According to Fowler's recent report, Stephen Ross's sons are now getting involved in football operations. That could mean fresh voices, different perspectives, and maybe, finally, a willingness to make tough decisions. Now, about that report from Fowler mentioning Stephen Ross's sons being involved, I've got to be honest, I'm not completely sold on that part. Here's why. Ross only has 2 biological children, and both are daughters. So unless that report was referring to a son-in-law or possibly a stepson, the details might have been a bit mixed up. It wouldn't be the first time something like that got lost in translation. What we do know is that there's already a clear succession plan in place for the Dolphins ownership. Ross's daughter, Jennifer Ross, has been active within the organization before and is widely expected to be the one who inherits control of the franchise in the future. In fact, reports have even suggested that Stephen Ross once turned down a massive $10 billion offer for the team, just so he could keep the Dolphins within the family. That tells you how much he values legacy over profit. He wants this organization to stay under his family's name for generations to come. NFL insider Chris Kaufman also chimed in on this, pointing out that Fowler's comment might have actually been referring to Daniel Silman, Ross's son-in-law, who currently works alongside him as a CEO in one of his business ventures. That explanation would make a lot more sense. So, was it a mistake in the report? Maybe. Could have just been a slip of the tongue. But either way, it gives us a rare glimpse into the inner workings of the Dolphins' ownership and how much Ross is still trying to keep control close to home. So, we've already broken down Mike McDaniel's hot seat and what it means right now, but let's shift gears for a moment. What happens next? What's the plan after McDaniel, if and when the Dolphins finally decide to move on? Let's start with the most immediate scenario. What if he's fired mid-season? If that happens, the most logical choice for interim head coach would likely be Anthony Weaver, Miami's current defensive coordinator, assuming he's still around. And I say assuming, because there's always a chance that McDaniel and Chris Greer try to shift the blame onto him for the defensive issues this year. Would it be fair? Absolutely not. Would it be shocking? Unfortunately, no. I could even see a situation where both McDaniel and Weaver are let go at the same time. But in my opinion, that would be a huge mistake. Weaver's one of the few bright spots on this coaching staff, respected across the league, a strong leader in the locker room, and a coach with a real future in the NFL. Yeah, the defense has had its struggles, no doubt about that. But he's been handed a roster that doesn't exactly make his job easy. Last season, his unit showed flashes of real toughness, and players still respond to him. If you're looking for a steady hand to guide the team through chaos, Anthony Weaver fits that role perfectly. Now, let's look further ahead, the long-term plan for the 2026 season and beyond. NFL insider Tony Pauline, who we mentioned earlier, believes that if McDaniel is shown the door, Stephen Ross could go after a coach with an entirely different personality, someone more old-school, disciplined, and hard-nosed. A guy who demands respect from day one. Pauline even compared the type of coach Ross might want to someone in the Dan Quinn mold, tough, defensive-minded, and laser-focused on accountability. He also floated an interesting name, Rex Ryan, the former Jets and Bills head coach, now working as an analyst for ESPN. That would definitely send a message that the Dolphins are done with the player-friendly experiment and ready to bring in someone who's not afraid to shake things up from top to bottom. Let me be completely honest with you. Hiring Rex Ryan would be one of the worst moves the Miami Dolphins could possibly make. Sure, the name sounds exciting, and yes, he's loud, entertaining, and has experience. But as a head coach, he's just not it. People remember those early Jets years like they were magic, taking Mark Sanchez to back-to-back AFC championship games. But that was a long time ago. Since then, his record speaks for itself. Losing seasons, locker room chaos, and players flat out giving up on him by the end. That's not leadership. That's disaster waiting to happen. And I know what's floating around out there. Those rumors about Bill Belichick possibly becoming available. Some fans are even joking about him in Dolphins colors. But let's be real for a second. If we're talking about bad fits, Belichick might be the only person who ranks worse than Rex Ryan for Miami's future. The game has changed. The league has evolved. And what worked in New England for 2 decades doesn't mean it'll work here in Miami. Both of those guys represent the past, not the future. The Dolphins need energy, creativity, and leadership that connects with today's players, not a throwback to an old-school mentality that no longer fits this locker room. So, let's flip the question around. Who should be the next head coach of the Miami Dolphins? Let me know down in the comments. Drop your pick for Miami's next long-term leader, not just a mid-season patch-up. Now, if I'm giving you my short list, here are the 5 names I think deserve real consideration. Mike McCarthy, experienced, proven, and still capable of commanding a locker room. Robert Saleh, a fiery defensive mind with real leadership qualities. He knows how to inspire. Jesse Minter, currently the defensive coordinator for the Chargers and a trusted part of Jim Harbaugh's coaching tree. Chris Shula, grandson of the legendary Don Shula, and an up-and-coming NFL coach quickly climbing the ranks. The Miami connection makes that name even more intriguing. If the Dolphins want a fresh start, these are the kinds of names that represent growth, energy, and accountability, not recycled ideas from a decade ago. It really seems like Miami might be leaning toward hiring a veteran coach, someone who's been in the big chair before and knows how to handle the pressure. If that's the case, one name that could enter the conversation is Ron Rivera. Now, to be clear, Rivera wouldn't be my top pick. If you ask me, he's a distant third behind Mike McCarthy and Robert Saleh. Personally, Saleh would be my number 1 choice, hands down. He got dealt a rough hand in New York. Most of those problems came from the front office, poor roster building, inconsistent quarterback play, and a GM who simply couldn't get it right. Saleh's coaching wasn't the issue. And look what he's doing now. He went straight from being the Jets head coach to defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers, and that defense is on fire. They're flying around, playing tough, making big plays, and keeping their team alive even when the offense is banged up. That's leadership. That's grit. Saleh has that energy Miami desperately needs, and I believe he'd be even better in his second head coaching run. But let's not stop there. There are 2 massive names Dolphins fans should keep an eye on. John Harbaugh from the Ravens and Mike Tomlin from the Steelers. There's real noise coming out of Baltimore that Harbaugh's future could be in question. Some Ravens fans are even calling for a change, and honestly, that blows my mind. The guy's been a model of consistency. Still, if Baltimore actually decides to move on, Miami should be ready to make that call immediately. And then there's Mike Tomlin, one of the most respected coaches in the entire league. The Steelers are hanging on in the AFC North right now, but if things go south and they collapse late in the season, it wouldn't shock me if Pittsburgh decides it's time for a change. If that happens, I wouldn't hesitate for 1 second. Mike Tomlin in Miami would be a home run hire. A leader of men, respected everywhere he's been, and the kind of coach who could bring instant accountability and toughness back to this Dolphins locker room. That's where I'll wrap it up for today's show. But hey, if you want more Miami Dolphins talk, make sure you're part of the squad. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and stay tuned. We've got another video dropping later today breaking down Miami's draft targets, plus 2 more tomorrow. And don't forget, we'll be live on Sunday for Dolphins versus Chargers. It's going to be a wild one.